Our topic is today's very exciting launch of IMAX Enhanced with dtsx sound on Disney+, and what that means for home theater enthusiasts. I'm delighted to welcome a very special guest, Sven Mevissen, hope I got that right, of Xperi, parent company to DTS. Welcome, Sven, and please take a moment to introduce yourself.
Hey, Brian. Hey, Chris. It's very, very nice to be here. It's indeed a very exciting moment for us at DTS, and I'm happy to dive into the topic. So my name is Sven Mevissen. I'm a product manager at Xperi. Xperi is a company, we have different brands, some of which you might be familiar with. We have TiVo, we have DTS, with HD Radio. I'm part of the DTS product management team, and my responsibility is the IMAX Enhanced program and ecosystem, and specifically, around television and developing certification programs. And also, part of that responsibility is making sure that the overall dtsx codec ecosystem, remains to be a healthy ecosystem and a good experience for people at home.
Great. Well, thank you. And also joining us is Acoustics Editor-at-Large, Chris Boylan, who has recently written a number of articles on DTS and immersive audio. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
All right, Chris. Well, we're here to discuss the May 15th launch of IMAX Enhanced on Disney+, which is going to debut over 18 films from the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Queen Rock Montreal concert. So, Sven, while we're talking about IMAX Enhanced, I think we have to go back and talk about really what IMAX is. And I think people are already familiar with the giant movie theater screens, but how does that translate into bringing that experience home?
So that's really the key premise of IMAX Enhanced. When we formed that partnership together with IMAX, the goal was really to bring that IMAX theatrical experience to people at home. And IMAX obviously is known for big screens, big sound, big theaters, very high quality video and audio. And we wanted to take that sort of like pinnacle of entertainment and movie going experience and understand basically what is the formula, and then translate that formula into the consumer home domain, if you will. And there are a couple of different components. One obviously is content. So IMAX content, if it's shot on IMAX cameras, is very unique in terms of resolution, in terms of quality. There is the IMAX expanded aspect ratio. If you've been to an IMAX theater, you realize very quickly that the dimension of the screen is a little different, right? It's a much taller screen than it is wide. It's also very wide, but it's also, very tall. If you compare that to, a regular screen, cinema screen, like a widescreen experience, which is much wider than it's tall, it's just sort of, again, a different aspect ratio, which aligns with the aspect ratio with which IMAX movies are being shot. So again, it's a 1:9 by 1 aspect ratio. We have some variations around this, but just generally speaking. So there's the image portion that makes this unique. And by bringing IMAX Enhanced to consumers at home, it's the first time that consumers at home are able to experience that expanded aspect ratio image component with IMAX Enhanced Picture. There's an audio component as well. IMAX theaters are very well known for this big, impactful sound. They achieve this with differences in how rooms are being set up, in differences of obviously equipment being used. One of the main differences in an IMAX theater is that's all point sources. So in terms of like the number of speakers you have fewer numbers of speakers in the room, but they are much bigger and much more powerful. They also don't have to rely on an LFE channel in the content. because they have much higher headroom, purely because of the fact that the equipment is much more capable in reproducing all kinds of frequencies and at higher SPL. So in a sense, an IMAX theater from an audio perspective is closer to what your home theater would look like in terms of the 3 discrete speakers behind the screen, in a theater, and then you have your point source speakers and your speakers above you. And what we've done is, again, on the image side as well as on the audio side, is again translating those unique attributes into a home environment so that it actually makes sense, right? So for instance, we cannot assume in a home environment that you have full range speakers throughout. So we had to recreate sort of an LFE channel for that particular, way of distributing IMAX sound for home environment consumption. And there's a dedicated process to going from the IMAX theatrical print master, which today is a 12-track print master. And we bring this to a basically 10-track, a plus LFE channel soundtrack for consumers at home. So again, it's the idea is that we stay as true to the original, creative intent and the original master on the image and on the audio side as possible. But we had to make some adjustments to make sure that this plays well in a consumer environment. In addition to the content component and some of the unique parts around this, is making sure that it is a consistent, high quality experience. And that's where the device certification comes into play. All theaters, all IMAX theaters are always, well maintained. There's not a situation where you go in theater and suddenly, your left channel is missing because, someone forgot to plug it in or something like that. So there's a high quality standard on that experience as well. And that's what we're trying to achieve with our certification program. So IMAX Enhanced, in addition to IMAX Enhanced content, has a certification component where OEMs, device manufacturers, can opt into being certified for IMAX Enhanced to make sure that they not only meet very high quality criteria, but also that that's a consistent experience, throughout the IMAX Enhanced ecosystem overall. And then there's a third component, which is sort of playback optimization. There are dedicated IMAX modes on, let's say, a TV to make sure that the picture, has the right settings, and you're not watching your Marvel movie in sports mode on your TV, because that's not necessarily, what it was meant for. And the same is true on the audio side. So during that conversion process of bringing the IMAX soundtrack into a format that can be distributed at home, there's also, again, the playback component, making sure that it sounds the best way possible for consumers at home. So there's actually a lot, right? When we talk about IMAX Enhanced, everybody's always like content, expanded aspect ratio. But I think similarly important is the device certification and the playback optimization for consumer devices at home.
Okay, well, the big change, I think, is Disney Plus is now launching this format. Previously, there was IMAX Enhanced content on Disney Plus prior to the May 15th, but can you talk about what's different now after this new change? What has Disney done different? What do consumers need to know, and how do they know that they're going to experience this new IMAX Enhanced with DTSX sound?
Yeah. So about 2.5 years ago, we launched what we consider the first phase of bringing IMAX Enhanced to consumers at home on Disney Plus, and that was the image component, the picture component. So again, IMAX Enhanced content stems directly from the IMAX theatrical experience, and the content is being basically remastered for the home, but by keeping the same sort of visual attributes like expanded aspect ratio. IMAX also has a dedicated remastering technology called DMR, which is being used to increase fidelity of the picture and manage grain and make sure that there are no artifacts in the picture and things like that. So we launched that about 2.5 years ago on Disney Plus, and every time you pick one of the available IMAX Enhanced titles on Disney Plus, by default, you are actually getting the IMAX Enhanced version. If you don't want that, you can go in and select, the widescreen version, but it will have the letterbox, on top and on the bottom for most content. and with the IMAX Enhanced version, you again, for selected scenes, you get expanded aspect ratio, and it fills up your screen basically to almost 100%, which is a more immersive experience, if you will. But from the beginning, IMAX Enhanced was always about not just image and picture quality. It was also about, sound, which makes up the other 50% of the experience. So we are now very excited to be able to launch IMAX Enhanced Sound to complement the experience on Disney Plus for, as you mentioned, a select number of titles from the Marvel catalog, and Queen Rock Montreal, which is a very exciting title and has been one of the biggest concert films for IMAX ever. So bringing that experience to consumers at home, I think it's really something unique and something special for people that actually, really care about, recreating that theatrical environment in their living rooms or in their home theaters. And things like that. So very excited that we get to that second phase of the experience.
Right, and I guess my question on that would be, you have mentioned that it's been, I guess a labor of love for many years. What was the biggest challenge in being able to bring that dtsx and IMAX Enhanced sound component into production? Is it primarily a bandwidth issue, or were there other factors at play?
Rolling out new technologies, especially in such a fragmented media and device environment that we are in today, takes time. So DTSX for streaming, which is our latest codec, is relatively new. It's been around for a number of years, and there is some good level of device support. But obviously, when launching new technology, you want to make sure that you can reach a relevant number of devices in market. And we've been building up that footprint in market over the past couple of years, and are getting to a point where we think there are enough devices out there so that enough people out there that care about the experience can opt into that experience and buy relevant equipment that's necessary to actually get that experience. And I know we're going to talk about exactly what sort of components are necessary to receive IMAX Enhanced sound. But again, at the end of the day, back in the DVD and Blu-ray days, life was a little simpler, right? Because you had like a single standard defining, what kind of media types are allowed, what kind of codecs are supported on a DVD or on a Blu-ray disc. But with streaming and those sort of proprietary ecosystems that exist, that streaming services build for themselves for good and valid reasons, things are just a little bit more complicated, right? They don't all adhere to a set of specifications and standards. What Netflix does might be completely different than what Disney Plus, does. And again, that's just the time we live in. But that also means that rolling out new technologies is a little bit more of an effort when it comes to like supporting it on the content side, supporting it on the distribution side, supporting it on the device side, and all those things need to come together in order to make this sort of like a meaningful footprint and meaningful launch, and that services like Disney Plus have the reach that they're looking for their subscribers. That's definitely a big part of it. Bandwidth, to a certain extent, you could argue that bandwidth on a Blu-ray didn't really matter. So you could add additional audio tracks without sort of like, paying any kind of like bandwidth penalty. With streaming, obviously, bandwidth still matters, right? So services are paying money for making sure that, the content they're putting out there can be consumed. And the higher the bandwidth required, the more money they have to pay at the end of the day. So it is a consideration. I wouldn't call it the key consideration.
Okay. And I know that you referenced Blu-ray in the Blu-ray days. Well, we're still in the Blu-ray days, I guess. I mean, you can still buy some UHD Blu-rays with DTSX soundtracks. you were delivering DTSX a little bit differently, right? There was an existing codec, DTS HD high resolution or DTS HD master audio, and that was kind of the transport layer for the DTSX soundtrack. Now, from what you've told me, now there is no separate transport layer. There's just the DTSX codec for DTSX for streaming, which, by the way, was that previously called DTSX for televisions? Was that the same codec? Because I know there's been some reference to that as well.
Right. There's a couple of things. Let me try to sort of like unpack that. Yes, absolutely true. So from the beginning, part of the fundamental design concept for DTS was sort of backwards compatibility. All DTS devices in market support our core bitstream, which is the bitstream that we launched with about 25 years ago. We call this DTS core, and that's sort of the DTS 5.1 component. When we introduced DTS HD and as a successor DTSX, the original Blu-ray DTSX, I should say, the core component was always part of the bitstream, and then we added extension on top of that to support additional use cases like immersive use cases, higher resolution use cases, completely lossless use cases, and things like that. But the idea was still true that you had one bitstream that could cater basically every single DTS device out there. So even if you had a legacy DTS AVR from like 10 years ago, it would be able to decode the DTS core component in the bitstream and basically just ignore everything else around this. We changed that concept basically fundamentally by introducing DTSX for streaming. And primarily because of the efficiencies required to bring high quality audio to consumers at home using the internet. So there was really no point in us adding all that additional payload basically to the bitstream itself to cater for all those different use cases. And we chose to basically take that burden away from the stream itself and put it on the device side. So that's a sort of fundamental change in the concept of how we deliver DTS today versus how we used to deliver DTS in the days of DVD and Blu-ray.
Okay, that makes sense. So any of the new components, which right now are all televisions, will see the DTSX for stream. I guess the HDMI handshake with the decoding device, be it a receiver or a soundbar, will identify what level of DTS it can support, and then the source device, the TV, will transcode to the highest quality that the receiver or soundbar can accept. That's fair
exactly
to say that?
Right. Absolutely. Okay. Exactly.
So if you do have a 10-year-old, if you had a 10-year-old DTSX receiver, that probably would work with the new, say, Sony or Hisense TVs, because they're seeing the DTSX for stream, and then transcoding it to something that the older devices can understand.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yes.
Okay.
Real quickly to clarify, they're transcoding it, but are they essentially downgrading it from the full IMAX Enhanced to what that version of the receiver or soundbar can offer? Is that accurate?
I wouldn't say downgrading. So certainly not downgrading. So there are two components to specifically IMAX Enhanced sound. I mentioned the playback modes, and how we trigger playback modes on a IMAX Enhanced device is by carrying basically a content identifier in the bitstream. So when you get content from Disney Plus for an IMAX Enhanced title, we embed that content identifier in the bitstream, and that content identifier is being passed on to the downstream sync device. So even if there's transcoding happening, that content identifier is still intact once it arrives at the sync device destination, basically, where the decoding happens. And that is also what then again on the sync device triggers the dedicated playback mode for IMAX Enhanced equipment. So the transcoding in itself is just making sure that for a DTSX for streaming bitstream, where, as Chris mentioned, with the EDIT handshake, the source device has identified the capability of the downstream sync device. The transcode is basically just making sure that whatever the highest capability of the downstream sync device is, that's the stream that is being transcoded to. So for instance, if you have a DTSX capable receiver, then it's a simple DTSX for streaming to DTSX transcode. But basically, it's a one-on-one relationship. There's nothing else going on. There's no down mixing or anything going on. Nothing that would degrade the signal. And if you have an older device like a DTS HD or DTS digital surround device, then we would say, okay, this is the 10-channel DTSX for streaming, but your downstream sync device can only handle a 5.1. So we would apply the sort of common down mix coefficients that we've been using for years in order to recreate that experience on the downstream sync device.
Right. So even a non-DTSX soundbar, as long as it has some flavor of DTS, would get a DTS stream. Exactly. And it would decode, let's say, the 5.1 stream. And,
exactly.
And you'd still get your DTS sound. And it's still sourced from the IMAX 12-channel mix. So that's, I think, what makes it different from the soundtracks that have come before it, is that it's going to the IMAX mix that was intended for IMAX theaters. It's optimizing it for the home theater environment. And then it's then rendering it to the best extent that it can on the actual decoding, or as you call it, the sync device.
Exactly. So for us, that's really a key component. And we realized that a theatrical mix in a home environment is not always the right choice. So if you watch on your television late at night with like 2 speakers attached and your kids are sleeping next door, I would not necessarily say that you should opt into DTSX with the full dynamic range of the theatrical mix. We do have some kind of like smart logic and advanced loudness management specifically for the use case where you watch on your TV and you listen on your TV, right? So we understand that TVs typically can't deal with that dynamic range, and they have device limitations in terms of like frequency responses and things like that.
Okay.
So we do apply some kind of like loudness management so that it's still a good experience. But I don't want to pretend that what we can do in an automatic fashion would be as good as what a creative, person is doing to create those near field mixes for like a stereo playback and things like that. So it is really meant as a theater-like experience for people that care about that kind of experience, that have the components and the loudspeakers and the AVR or higher end soundbars at home to really sit down and have that experience without worrying too much what your neighbors might think or anyone else really. So, and there is also,
my neighbors already hate me, so it's fine. They'll just hate me a little bit more.
Right. What is also important to point out is that, and we get those questions all the time, right? So the theatrical mix has different dynamic range, but it also adheres to pretty much no real standard, right? The only standard is that the director in the background and the producers in the background are happy. That's all you really care about from a creative perspective when you create those soundtracks in a theatrical environment. And yes, there's certain root tunings, and there are certain SPLs that are sort of like not really required, but recommended for playback in the theater. For home, that's a little different, right? So there are certain adjustments that you make when you create your home theater or near field mix, as you guys probably know, near field for stereo, near field for 5.1, near field for any kind of like immersive flavor. So the experience when you're on Disney Plus and you listen to IMAX Enhanced sound and you go back and forth, and there is a way to do that, right? You can go back and forth between the home theater mix, the near field mix, the dedicated near field mix, and the theatrical experience, is that it will sound different. Right, it's not going to sound drastically different, but one of the most obvious things is going to be there's a level difference, because again, once it's in theaters, it basically, it's completely creative freedom. Whatever it is, you know, in the theater is what you will get at home with that IMAX Enhanced sound version. Once you go into a near field environment, you know, you reduce the dynamic range, you maybe bring in, you know, your left and rights, you change your panning a little bit and all those things. So again, there's going to be a difference. And I hope people are not just going to judge by one is louder than the other, because that's really not what this is about. It's really about sort of like the creative intent and sort of like this puristic idea of I get the mix that was created for theater at home. And that's really for the first time. So.
But I think you're saying that IMAX Enhanced will play louder in a home environment than, and I think we also have to bring it up because people are going to ask, everyone's used to Dolby Atmos or hearing about Dolby Atmos, and people are going to wonder, like, why do I want to turn the setting on? Why do I, what am I going to hear differently? And it sounds like you're saying it's instantly going to be louder and more dynamic.
I think, well, I will say, depending on the scene you're listening to, you have more dynamic range, which really means at the end of the day, the louder bits are louder and the quieter bits are quieter, right? That's really what this is about. Where theatrically, you could argue you take a 24-bit signal and you have 144 dB of dynamic range, and that's sort of like that's the range that you can operate in. That's not the range that you operate in when you create a home theater mix, right? You bring that down, and you, out of the 144 dB, maybe there are like 25 dB of dynamic range, and that's really it. So no, it's not by default just going to be louder. But the louder scenes are going to be louder and the quieter scenes are going to be quieter. So that's really sort of like, when we talk about dynamic range, that's kind of like the key difference there. But whatever the creative team that, was editing and mixing the soundtrack and, with obviously input from the filmmakers came up with and felt like that's how we want our movie to be represented from an acoustical perspective, that's what we are putting into the dtsx codec and are delivering to consumers at home.
Makes sense. And do you actually get involved with any of the studios as they're creating or deciding which content to bring to the IMAX Enhanced program, or is that more of a decision between IMAX and the studios? And where does
that's right. That's mostly a conversation between IMAX and the studios. There are existing relationships, right? Because IMAX is such an important partner on the theatrical side because of, really their, you could say, dominance in the theatrical experience, the premium theatrical experience. IMAX movies always over-indexed on the box office. For the number of screens they have, they make, substantially more money than any other screen out there.
Well, they also cost a lot more.
They cost, yes, that's certainly part of it.
But they don't necessarily cost more than a Dolby Cinema. I mean, you have that premium price that you're used to paying for the premium experience, and what you're saying is per screen they're generating a lot more income, and studios like that. But that hopefully, I think with this program, if it goes well and people are excited about it, we'll have more than just the Marvel Cinematic Universe and a Queen concert film to choose from, let's say maybe 6 months from now. Maybe.
Yeah, I hope so too. And there are other content services. For instance, we have a partnership with Sony Pictures. And as you might know, Sony, they have their own service called, it used to be called Pravia Core.
Now it's Sony Pictures Core.
Sony Pictures Core, right. They have over 150 or 200 IMAX Enhanced titles in their catalog.
Oh, I didn't realize they had so many. Wow.
Yeah. It's a substantial number. And Sony as a studio is a little bit different in terms of like sort of their distribution strategy. So some of that content is also available outside of Pravia Core or Sony Pictures Core on Rakuten, for instance, in Europe. So you can get additional IMAX Enhanced content on other services. But yes, so those conversations with other streaming services are ongoing. And while I cannot really comment or speak to them, you know, we also think that there's going to be a lot of momentum with this launch on Wednesday. Today, I should say, with this launch today, that will.
We're recording this in advance, but it's okay. People realize that.
Right.
Yeah. By the time it's live, all of these titles should be available on Disney Plus if you have the right gear. So.
Yes, exactly. If you have the right gear, that's a key component.
And I will say I did try testing this. I was so excited about DTSX and IMAX Enhanced that I had a Sony OLED for review last year, and I went right to that title that was IMAX Enhanced, and I played it, and all I got was a standard DTS track. And the reason for that was that out of Sony's lineup of TVs, there was really only one TV last year that could decode DTSX directly, and that was not the one that I was reviewing. It was the A95L. I had the A80L. So, a couple of follow-up conversations with the Sony people. They're like, "Oh yeah, you need the 95L for that," and I'm like, "Great. Well, why don't you send me one of those?" So it is cool that now more TVs are going to be, supporting that, both in Disney Plus and in Sony Pictures Core. The whole Bravia lineup for 2024. The 7, the 8, and the 9 all decode DTSX. So
that's correct.
In addition to Disney Plus, there'll be, I guess, a few more choices available in Sony Pictures Core as well on those Sony TVs.
Yeah. And Sony, obviously, Sony goes a long way back with DVD and Blu-ray, even Super Audio CD. I was a big fan of Super Audio CD back in the days. But anyway,
I still have some.
I have, my favorite records are, mostly on Super Audio CD. Peter Gabriel Up, it's amazing. Anyway,
Roxy Music, Avalon, and SACD. It's a wonderful mix.
Or some of the Pink Floyd stuff, Dark Side of the Moon in Super Audio CD is pretty amazing.
Love it.
Yeah, exactly. I was about to say, I forgot what I was about to say. Oh yeah, Pure Stream is technology for that. The bits rates that Sony is delivering with the Pure Stream technology are outrageous. But the quality is also amazing. It goes up to, I think, 80 megabits or something like that. So that's something that's unique to the Sony service, that you can enable on your A95L and get quick picture quality that's really, really outstanding. So
right.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. You see, so I think we covered a lot of the questions I had. I guess my one lingering question is that people think DTSX is DTSX, and it's you see that one logo, you think the codec is the same everywhere. It seems like that has changed with DTSX for streaming. Did you consider calling it like DTSX Plus or something to differentiate it a bit from the previous versions? I mean, I know you're calling it DTSX for streaming, and you're referring to it as the latest version of the codec. But do you think there are going to be any people who are confused by using that name DTSX in what's really almost a brand new codec?
Yeah, so there was a lot of debate, as you can imagine. Internally, we call it P1 and P2, where we say DTSX P1 is Profile 1, which is the codec used on Blu-ray. And Profile 2, and that's a little bit sort of, maybe I'm oversharing here, but I think that's not the end of the world. P2 is Profile 2, which is our streaming codec.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, from a technical perspective, they have nothing, common with each other. It's completely different coding technology on P2 DTSX for streaming than it is for P1. For some of the reasons that we talked about, right? It's a much higher efficient codec. And it just didn't make any sense for us to continue carrying a 25-year-old codec within, something that needs to be fit for purpose for today's applications. So yes, so we've been trying to consolidate the logos to actually reduce consumer confusion around this. But the moment you dig into this a little bit further from a more technical perspective, and for people that are interested in sort of like the technicalities of it, I have to agree that it might get a little confusing if we call everything DTSX, but it's actually two different things. And then you have a DTSX AVR at home, but it doesn't actually know what to do with DTSX for streaming and things like that. So we've been trying to simplify this as much as possible. But yes, you can poke holes into this and then ask questions, which are totally fair questions. But I do think that with this concept of like, the source device is handling all the burden of making sure that there is connectivity and compatibility to downstream sync devices, consumers ideally don't need to care. As long as they have DTSX on the one device and DTSX on the other device, they will play back and work together, just as intended.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, I've already gotten involved in some Reddit threads and people are talking about it like, what? Why is it called the same thing? But I think your approach is sound. I mean, only the newer devices can support the new DTSX for streaming, and they take care of backward compatibility. So no matter what DTS device is downstream, the sync device, it'll still support DTS or DTSX or, DTS master HD, DTS HD master audio, depending on what its capabilities are. So I think it's a great technical solution to the issue. And I think potentially, I mean, you're not going to get somebody trying to put a DTSX stream, DTS for streaming stream onto a DTSX device, because that source device that's looking at that DTSX for streaming stream will never output that, other than in a format that connected device can understand. So I think I don't think there's going to be a lot of technical problems. I think there just might be some people who are assuming that their TV, which maybe in the past was able to bitstream out a DTS signal, may not get the updated Disney Plus app that allows them to take advantage of the DTSX, the new DTSX stream and IMAX Enhanced content.
That's a good point. In the past, we had this concept of passing through a bitstream, where we could do that because we knew that the core bitstream, the core DTS bitstream, can be decoded by every single DTS capable device. Full stop. Right. So passing something from one device to the other device, at least, knowing that the end device, sync device, has DTS capability, didn't really, present any issues, any risk. But again, that's different with DTSX for streaming. Since those sync devices don't know what to do with this, there's always going to be a version of transcoding, which, you could argue makes the integration a little bit more complicated. But again, it's in the spirit of making sure that we have, state-of-the-art technology that provides a high quality, high fidelity experience for consumers at home. And that was the best way for us to realize that.
So I'm wondering whether you're able to, I mean, I guess you probably can do this at work. Have you been able to listen to these tracks in like a home theater setting at your own home, being
unfortunately not in my own home. But we've done demos at CES this year, and we've done demos at NAB this year, using basically off-the-shelf components and a beta version of the Disney Plus app. And I'm still amazed, even after being like in the industry for 20 years, that you can get that kind of experience, image and sound, over the internet to your home. So I think it's really unique and it's very special. And again, for people that are interested in that, like IMAX, that have been to IMAX theaters, that care about audio and picture quality, and have a good sounding setup at home, that for me, that's the way to experience content. Again, not all the time. If I listen late at night, that's different use case. But sitting down with the family,
late at night, you'd use DTSX headphone or DTS headphone X.
Right. You could do that. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Why not?
Right. Yeah. But yeah, it's a really great experience. So we're very excited about it.
Brian, I think you had.
I got a question here. So we've kind of talked around all this, but to really get this IMAX Enhanced DTSX sound, you need 12 speakers, right? Is that the ultimate way to get this amazing sound?
So the consumer version is 10. So you only need 10. It's a 5.1.4 native experience, if you will. Well, do you need 10 speakers? If you want this to be as close to the theatrical experience as possible? Yes. That's just the right answer, right? I mean, are there good sounding soundbars out there that potentially have some virtualization technology that will still give something that's a really good experience? Yes. I think that conversation goes back all the way to the beginning of 5.1 and surround sound, right? Do I really need to have like 5 speakers and a subwoofer in order to experience surround sound? And, we have post-processing technology like VirtualX, where we claim, it's virtualizing your speakers and things like that. I've spent the first 15, almost 20 years of my professional career in post-production for film and television. And so I have a very puristic approach to things like that. And I would absolutely say, yes, you need as many speakers as you have channels in order to come close to that, creative intent in the experience that filmmakers and creative folks working on it intended it to be. But there is always this consumer convenience factor, right? Where if it's not something that you can realize at home for physical limitations, or even, you're not willing to spend that kind of money, but you're still interested in a good quality experience, there are solutions out there that I think are working really well. It's not the same experience, but it still can be a really good experience. And I think that's really, up to the consumer making those choices. And to sort of like come full circle to IMAX Enhanced, that was also part of the intent of the program, right? That, just like you have the choice as a consumer when you go to the movies between an IMAX theater and a non-IMAX theater, if you care, you go with the IMAX theater. It's not a different movie, you're going to laugh at the same spots, you're going to be scared at the same spots, no matter which room you choose. But if experience and quality of the experience is part of what you care about, then you choose the IMAX version. And similar with the IMAX Enhanced certification program, right? If you care about picture quality, if you care about sound quality, don't worry about all the technical jargon like HDR10 and all those things, right? Look for the IMAX Enhanced logo, and we promise a good experience for those devices in your environment. So that's the idea. That's why we have IMAX Enhanced certified soundbars. So, yeah.
Right. I guess my follow-up question would be, what about for our readers? And I'm sure there are many who have a 7.1.4 set up at home.
Yes.
Where does that get generated? Because it has to be augmented, I guess, for the surround channels.
So
from 5.1.4 to 7.1.4.
If you have an IMAX Enhanced certified AVR hooked up to your 7.1.4, it's almost, I wouldn't say drastic, but I think it's a very puristic approach. So there are different ways you could recreate a 5.1.4 in a 7.1.4 setup, right? You could upmix, or you can position your surrounds between your side and rear surrounds and things like that. But what we do is we actually, and I realize some people might be a little bit upset about this, but that's a conscious decision that we choose together with IMAX and together with the creative community. If the 5.1.4 is playing in your 7.1.4 setup, your sides are going to be silent, right? So there is, because it is as close to the theatrical experience as possible. And again, we do that by, if you look very closely in an IMAX theater, even your side surrounds are almost all the way back, right? So, and that's sort of like what we thought is the closest to that experience that you can get.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a very straightforward answer.
Your IMAX, if you turn off your IMAX mode, then the AVR is going to, remap those surround speakers to likely between the side and the back surround. So you will get sound coming out of all those speakers. But if you want the IMAX experience, then your sides are going to be silent in that case.
Gotcha. And I guess similar for if they have a 7.1.2, then only the 2 height speakers will be used, and the surround speakers that are not behind you, the side surround speakers, will also be deactivated if you're in the IMAX Enhanced mode. So you'll get a 5.1.2 render of that, correct?
Right. So
Okay.
let me think.
Because the 4 are just
probably-
height channels, right? So you would just
Yeah. So in
would they
theory, there
sum
might
height
be some
information? Yeah.
mapping going on.
Yeah.
There might be some mapping going on where we map between front, the 2 heights, and
Yeah.
the backs, so that you still get sort of like the positional experience. We wouldn't down mix the 4 heights into just 2 of them. I think that's not what we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But it'll probably figure it out in a way that makes sense.
That's the idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
I mean,
fortunately, I've got 5.1.4 in my basement right now, so I'm ready.
Perfect. You're good to go.
I mean, we've talked
Yeah.
about some hardware limitations, but I want to make sure consumers are aware of what they need to experience this. And I think what you're saying is you need an updated TV first, and that's going to control whether you can hear IMAX Enhanced. That's IMAX Enhanced compatible.
That's correct.
Is that accurate?
Yes. So when the first wave of supported products for this launch are going to be Android/Google TVs that support DTSX. All the, as Chris mentioned, all the new Sony TVs, the 6, 7, and 8 Bravia series, or is it 7, 8, 9? I think it's 7, 8, 9. Right?
Yep.
7, 8, 9, right? Support DTSX. Beautiful TVs. Hisense has a big footprint of DTSX capable TVs with running Android. Also very good TVs. In Europe, we have Philips IMAX Enhanced certified TVs with support for DTSX. There are Sharp products. There are TCL. So again, there is no
TCL.
So
Sorry. So will the US TCL TVs be a part of this launch? Because I was just at a
with
TCL
Android
event last week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, they'll work as well. Okay, I'm going to need to update my article.
So I was just about to say there's no,
okay. Great. So
there's no restriction as long as you have a DTSX capable TV and you're running Android or Google TV, and you are in a region that is being serviced by Disney Plus, you can opt into that experience. Yes.
Okay, great.
And is this a software upgrade that any manufacturer can do, or is there an actual hardware piece that's in the TV that's making this possible?
Well, there's a simple answer to that, but that's not the reality, right? You could just update your TV in theory, but that's not typically what TV OEMs do, right? Because they want to sell new products the next year. So
right.
There is a, well, yeah, so that's just what it is, right? There might be cases where a TV OEM is deciding that this is an important enough feature for them that they provide this over an OTA update. But there are so many different things that go along with doing something like this, right? I mean, there's some certain licensing requirements where you have to have logos on boxes and logos in manuals and all that stuff, right? That's very difficult to realize once you have product in market. So I think it's rather rare that you get sort of like feature updates for products already in market. So I think that's not very common. Let's just put it that way. But
No.
there are, if you go into Best Buy or, your storefront of choice, they should have DTSX capable TVs to choose from. Yeah. And we are, we're supporting Android and Google at first, but there are other platforms that will follow. So for instance, LG with WebOS, there are other Unix-based operating systems on other TV brands, Vizio, for instance, with SmartCast, and they will follow later this year.
Okay, and potentially platforms like Fire TV or Roku could potentially support this in the future as well, with certification and potentially updates to the software.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Potentially.
Not sure whose cat that is, mine or yours. I'm hearing a
Well,
cat in
that's
the
mine.
background.
Yeah, a very noisy cat.
Okay.
Sorry.
I was looking
I also
around
have
for
a
mine
dog,
earlier, but I guess, but the dog keeps quiet.
The dog is quiet all the time. Cat is like, I'm the boss. That's what
Of
cats
course.
are, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
I've met cats. Yes, I own a cat. I am its slave.
Yeah.
Yeah. Final question for me for the consumer. And you brought up the thing about the logo. Should they be looking for the IMAX Enhanced logo, or do they need to be looking for the dtsx logo at the same time?
It's a good question. We say IMAX Enhanced is an additive ecosystem. So that means you don't have to have IMAX Enhanced components throughout. That's not necessary. If you again care about highest quality presentation, that's our recommendation. But for this particular feature and getting this feature at home, all you really need is a DTSX capable TV. So it doesn't have to be IMAX Enhanced certified. But many of those IMAX Enhanced certified TVs, at least 23 and 24 models, also with the high-end models have IMAX Enhanced certification.
Cool. And I guess my question would be, what else would you like to add in terms of what's coming in the future, if you can talk about it, or just general thoughts on how you think this launch is going to go?
So again, we've been working on this particular launch and this feature launch for a number of years, and we're all very excited and can't wait for people to experience this at home. In terms of what comes next, we continue our journey with IMAX and identifying other product categories, device categories where something like this might be relevant. We have other products in the IMAX Enhanced program. You can buy HP laptops, for instance, with IMAX Enhanced certification. The goal is really to sort of like set a very high standard for consumer electronic devices that meet, certain high quality criteria, and so it becomes easy for consumers to buy into that experience if they're willing to. I do think that with a lot of positive momentum, we'll hopefully see other services providing, additional pieces of content in IMAX Enhanced, because it really is a differentiated experience. So there's a lot of things I can't talk about, but right now we're really all about sort of like celebrating this moment together with IMAX and Disney Plus this week.
So final question from me is on the IMAX Enhanced certification. When they get that logo, is that just that they're compatible with IMAX Enhanced, or is there some level of quality assurance that customers get when they buy those components?
So two things. We developed certification requirements for all device categories that are IMAX Enhanced certified. If you look at the image side, we have specific certification criteria for TVs. We talk about, brightness, we talk about contrast ratio, we talk about panel technology, we talk about size. So there is a sort of minimum set of requirements that you have to meet in order to get IMAX Enhanced certified. And when I say minimum, the idea is that, again, if you buy into that certification program by choosing an IMAX Enhanced certified device, it meets high quality criteria, and that is what is being defined in that specification. That's also true for projectors, right? We have Sony projectors in the program that are some of the best consumer projectors out there. We have sound bars, we have AVRs, in addition to making sure that they meet certain, requirements around frequency response and, meeting certain SPLs. They also have the dedicated playback mode, just like a Sony TV, for instance, that is IMAX Enhanced certified, will have a dedicated IMAX Enhanced mode to make sure that the picture is in the best way possible for consuming and watching IMAX Enhanced content. Again, also true for the audio component, where we have dedicated IMAX Enhanced mode on the audio devices. For instance, like, mapping your surround channels to your rear surround in the 714, making sure that the filters are all set correctly. It does certain level of bass management to recreate that IMAX experience at home. We also have even mobile phones and tablets, where we use some of our headphone technology, to sort of like translate that experience from a big home theater onto devices that people just consume content with on a regular basis, right? That's part of that. And laptops, as I mentioned, and we are sort of in the process of expanding that ecosystem into other device categories as well. Yeah, so it's not.
I actually have to get the door because I think my Sony TV or soundbar just showed up. I'll be right back.
Right. Well, yeah, I guess we'll pause here for a moment while Chris is checking the door. Any other topics that we didn't cover yet that you wanted to make a point of?
We talked about devices necessary for launch to get the experience. Sounds like something heavy. I think we covered pretty much everything, Brian. So I think I'm good.
Okay.
Sorry, I wish that were timed better. Those are actually the Sony Bravia Quad Theater. Bravia Theater Quad, the 4 speakers system that I believe is both IMAX Enhanced and DTSX certified. So perfect time.
Is that the version 2, which just came out this year?
Yeah, the square ones that you.
The square ones. Yeah, they are in fact IMAX now certified. Yes, great product. I love the predecessor. They had some Wi-Fi issues, but great sounding setup.
Yeah, this, I think within a couple of days, the Bravia 7 TV is going to show up to go with it. So I'm hoping I'm ready on May 15th, which is today, right? Today?
Right, which is May 15th. Right? So as of today, if you want the IMAX experience at home, you can now get it with Disney Plus and a new, hopefully, Sony Hisense TCL TV. And you can experience the movie magic at home. And I want to thank Sven Mevissen for joining us today from Xperi, the parent company of DTS, and thank our editor-at-large, Chris Boylan. And we hope to see everybody next time. Thanks.
Thank you to our sponsor, Ecoustics. From the affordable but high-performance 3000i series to the new advanced 5000 range through to the high-end concept family. Make Ecoustics your entry point, your next sonic step up, or your end-all for your hi-fi and music listening journey.